Hello, my name is Jonathan with Advent House Plans. Welcome back to part 2 of the structural assembly where we actually start gluing stuff together. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, you're going to need to catch up on that, where we talk about the blocks, the parts, how to get them out, how to prepare them, how to combine them, and you should have all of the parts collected and ready to start assembly, and that's where we'll get started here. What I've done is I've set up on my table here a nice hard flat surface. It's an old shelf. I cover that in plastic because there's going to be CA glue going everywhere. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out some parts. I'm going to get the camera angled down on this so that you can see how these parts start to lay out, and we will start gluing this stuff up. Okay, with the parts all cleaned up, they're ready to start assembly. We have this great big white flat board, and with plastic for the CA glue, and then we've laid out our initial parts 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, and 6 with the braces 58, 56, and 67. Now, I mentioned that all of the parts are face up or face out, which means this part, when glued together, would actually go the other direction. It would go this way, which means part 4 would actually go way over here, and part 5 would be turned around and the numbers would face out. If that's the case, then we need to lay these parts down, numbers down. So we'll lay these down, face down like this. In this case, face up, so 1, 2, 3, they're all face up. And all we're going to do is we're going to set our braces in like this. That's the way that these two parts are going to come together. Once the bottom back is glued, it will stand up and it will sit in these slots here, and it will glue down and create the beginning of this overall structure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some glue. Make note that there's a lot of dust on these things, so make sure you wipe them down so that they don't, you're not trying to glue dust to dust. So we're using this stuff, gap filling medium, 5 to 15 seconds. And what we're going to do is, when we glue this together, you want to make sure the back side of this and the back side of this are flush with each other. So we'll just put some glue on here. We'll also put a little bit of glue on the sides of the tabs, and then hold it in place. And now we'll repeat on the front one. Once you have the parts glued and they're starting to dry, you can then come back and add glue to the edges here just to help strengthen that joint. And then we let dry. Once fully cured, we'll go ahead and do the other parts before we start assembling the assembled parts to the assembled parts. Okay, we're going to go through the same process with the top pieces here. We have parts 19, 20, and 21, and braces 54 and 55. We're going to glue them in just like we did to the other parts. However, same thing, this is the outward facing side. So we're going to flip them over so that this side will be on the inside of the model when we're done. I'll add glue and we'll hold it down and let it dry. Alright, we got that last one done. We're now ready to finish up the last of the big flat pieces. We have parts 22, 23, and 24 with brace number 53. We're going to do the same thing. This needs to be face up, so we're going to turn the whole thing upside down. We're going to test fit this, make sure it sits down there like we want it to, and then we add glue. On this part, make sure that these parts right here are lined up properly so that you don't end up with them crooked out like that. Hold them in place. and apply pressure. You'll notice we don't have a back brace on this. That's because these tabs here will hold the top back piece and it will create the brace for us. So now I'll hold this in place, I'll add a little more glue, and we'll be done with the flat stuff and we'll be ready to start assembling the main structure, including the walls. Okay, I've got all the flat pieces put together with their bracing, and now it's time to start putting things together. We're going to start with this piece, which is the flat top piece. This is the back top piece. We're in essence just going to stand it up, slip it in its slot. We're gluing it in there. Now do make note that when it is in there, there's a tiny bit of play left to right. Just try and center it mostly. And we just as simple as add the glue. Then once you get in there, push in from both sides to make sure that these two seams are clean. Should stand up nice and square, and then just let it dry. What we'll do is we'll set this one aside, and then we'll get started on the bottom and start putting walls up. Alright, with that top piece finished, we've replaced it with our bottom and our bottom back. We're going to repeat the exact same process by slipping it in here. So now we glue. Just going to make sure there's no dust on there. Here we go. Okay, before we glue these in place, we need to glue in our braces on the bottom here. In fact, we're going to do that on all of these bottom ones. So I've got some glue in place here, but first I'm just going to real quick add glue to the edges of each one of these points and place in one of these braces in each spot here. And once those are in place, we can then place our back piece and set it in here. You're going to want to do this while the glue is wet because it takes just a little bit of finagling. Stand these up just a little and they set in just like that. And now we'll just hold it in place until it's glued. And then glue more. And now let it finish. Alright, now with the back in place on the bottom and the braces all in place, we're ready to start putting the walls up. I've got my front wall and the two short side walls. Notice the number faces out. The short wall will sit right here. The other short wall will sit right there. And the front wall will simply tip up and tab into place. And then you glue. We'll glue this up, and then we'll add the two large side walls, and then we add the end walls, which I'll show you in just a little bit. Okay, we're ready to finish up the walls now. Normally number 7 would go right here. It has the two side windows optionally. However, I'm not going to want side windows on this model, and so you could fill these in with putty and just finish it like this, or to have a smoother surface, if you get part number 13 on this end and turn it inside out, you can place it in just like that. Now that gives you a nice smooth surface. You're going to end up putting an exterior finish, in our case the plastic brick, and so you're not going to see those windows anyway, but that gives you that full surface and no worries about the window openings. Now it's very important that you not glue the second one in yet, because this one needs to be glued and solid before we do the second one. And the reason is because we're now going to get out our flat top piece. And what we're going to do is, after this first side piece is glued in, you're going to stick this tab right here, into this slot here, and then you're going to stick the other side in there. The two tabs will be prevented from going in if you've got both sides glued in at once. So You'll glue this one in, then hold this top piece in place as you place the other one on this end. This will hold itself up once you get it glued in there. Then we'll be ready to start adding the roof pieces around the top. Okay, I've got the other side glued in. I've now turned the model around so that this side's closer. This is the front face now. We're now ready to glue this piece in. You'll see I've started it on the tabs. We then take this great big top piece and fit it into this tab over here. And very carefully slip it into this slot right here. Now that will hold itself, and you'll see that this fits in here nicely, and we'll now add glue and glue the heck out of this thing, and now we'll have the roof on ready to go. Alright, we're getting closer. After we've got all the wall pieces put in, including this roof section here, we're ready to put in the soffits. You're going to start in numerical order. Start with 14. You'll do 15 on the other side, and 16 goes on the end. When you're attaching these little tabs right here on the connection point may have to be modified just a little bit to get them to fit, but this one fits nicely. You'll repeat that on the other side, and then number 18. 18 likely will need just a little bit of trimming. It depends highly on how well these corners went together, how well they glued. But with just a tiny bit of trimming, the 18 sits in just like that, and I will glue those in place, and we'll be ready to move on. Alright, I have all my soffits glued in. I'm letting those dry. In the meantime, I'm going to set all my roof braces in. They just simply sit down on these slots. Note that the two tabs are facing out. They are going to be loose. That's okay. You'll see why that's okay little later on, but we'll place each one of these in their appropriate place. And with those in place, we're now ready to get started with the roof pieces. Now in this case, I am not doing the side windows, so I'm going to use the back side of this again. So in this case, number 26 would normally go here, but I'm going to turn it around and put it on this side. We'll repeat that on this side. Notice it slides underneath the roof section and into its appropriate slot there. And then the brace there. And we continue around the corner. Now in this case, number 29 sits in front of the side piece. Number 30, and we'll do the other side as well. And then the front, number 31. Now the braces inside are just to hold them generally in place. So what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and take the time to set the end pieces, because they can't go anywhere because they're based on this tab here. Once you get it glued in on this end, we add glue here, as well as on the inside we'll add the bracing, glue to the bracing. Then we'll set this. This piece will slide just a little bit left and right, and what we'll do is we will take this and we'll center the top on the roof pieces so that we know that we've got the same overhang. Then we'll add glue to this brace and this brace over here. So I'll go through the process and get all these pieces glued in now. When gluing in the angled roof pieces, the goal is to create this edge right here as equal as possible. The design calls for this slanted roof piece to end right on the face of this soffit. Keep in mind that all these holes, all these gaps, all of this will be filled with putty before we texture and paint. And so it doesn't have to be perfect, but the goal is to get it as close as possible. Quick note about this side piece. Even though number 29 is numbered before number 30, you're going to want to put this one in before you glue in number 29, and that's the same on the other side. Number 30 sits behind number 29, so make sure you put number 30 in place, then we'll glue number 29 in place. We'll repeat that process on the other side. Then we'll go ahead and set everything else and get number 30 to sit properly. And as we're preparing to glue number 29 in place, you'll make note that there's a bit of a gap here. That will be adjusted just a little bit with glue, but in the end we will putty this corner and it'll come out nice and clean, so don't worry about this discrepancy. During the gluing of the angled roof pieces, you might find a small hand clamp to be helpful. Alright, next step is to put in our two roof braces. These are parts number 26 and 27. They're going to slide into these slots from underneath. You'll notice the angle side will push up under the back side of this. So we're going to slip that underneath, and it'll come up through this slot. It might take just a little bit of finagling to get it into place. You'll slide it up something like that, and then when we get the other one in, we'll turn it over and we'll glue from the underside. We'll add glue so it's attached to this piece, we'll add glue so it'll attach to this piece and glue to here, and that'll provide the sufficient support. We'll repeat on the other side. So I flipped it over, I added some glue from the underside. What you're going to want to do is make sure that you've got sufficient pressure down so that we get a good connection here and underneath here. We'll repeat that on the other side, and then we'll let it set for gluing. Alright, so I put a brace on this. On this end, you want the face of this top piece to be the same distance from the angled roof as over here on the other side. So I put this cross piece brace on here, a clamp, just to get those things centered. You'll also notice across the front here that you want these to be mostly centered as well. And then I've got a smaller clamp that I'm going to use to clamp down this nose, and then from the underside, from underneath here, I'm going to add all kinds of glue around the front edge of this, and the top section will be finished gluing. Alright, we're down to the last step. We're going to put these base pieces on. You're going to probably want a ruler for this. What we're going to do is we're going to set this across the bottom here. These pieces are not in numerical order. You're going to want to do this piece first, then this short side piece, and then there will be this side piece, and we'll do some trimming to take care of that. You'll see that in a minute. So the first things first, this is number 36. We'll put it so it's face down. We'll set it roughly here, and then we're going to take a dimension off the bottom of the soffits. The important thing here is that the top of the base is the same distance from the bottom of the soffit, both on this side and on this side. And the reason is because when you put in the brick, you don't want that brick to be sitting on here and having it all crooked on the building. So make sure that these two items are perfectly parallel. To do that, I just stick a ruler under there, and in this case we're going to assume roughly 10 3/8. We'll set it on this side as well, and we'll lift this side to 10 3/8 as well. Double check it on this side. And now this base piece is perfectly parallel with this soffit. Now we know the soffit's square because of the CNC grooves, the slots that they're sitting in. However, you're going to want to consider what your plan is on the bottom of this piece. A lot of people like to get those little rubber feet and stick it on the bottom of this so that the wood is not touching any surface. That is not included in the kit, but you're welcome to get some. If you're planning on doing that, you're going to want to adjust this base piece up and down to make sure that it's where you want it. In a lot of cases, you can set it fairly flush with the bottom piece, or you can set it down just a little bit lower so that it is proud of that bottom piece to give yourself just a tiny bit more height. The other thing to consider is number 42 is your step, and it's going to be sitting right here for when the house is standing up. If you want that step to be just a little bit lower, then you're going to want to set those base pieces just a little lower as well. The actual location of where this piece sits is totally up to you. However, I'm going to go ahead and go right at that 10 3/8 number, there, and there, and we'll double check this side. And now I know that piece is parallel, and I will glue it in place. Notice that I'm pushing it all the way against this part here. I'll glue this one in place. This is going to hang long. It'll be longer than the face that you would expect. That's okay for now. We'll trim it in a minute. We'll then come back with 37, and we will set it in here, and we will glue it so that the tops of the base pieces are flush. That's the most important piece, the tops of the base pieces, not as important down here on the bottom. No one's going to see this. Everybody's going to see this. So I'll go through and I'll glue these two pieces in, and then we'll talk about this end. Okay, I've got this piece glued in. I've also got the short piece we'll look at in a minute. But when you take number 35 and you set it right here, you're going to see there's still a lip. The front base piece is longer than needed. That's on purpose because depending on how well this gets pushed together, you might have that overhang, and that's alright. After we get these glued in place, we'll just come back with our barrel sander and take it off. You'll also notice that the side piece is longer than the back of the house, and that's okay too. Same thing. We'd rather give you the piece too long that you clean up than too short, and then how do you fix it? So I'll come in and I'll go ahead and glue this piece in, and I'm going to repeat the process on the other side. Okay, we're looking at this short piece up here now. I've glued it in place, and you'll see that it is also proud. It's a little too tall, and that's on purpose. Number 41 will sit right here on the front of the house. So what we're going to do is we're going to shave this piece down until it's flush with this face here, so that this will be able to sit all the way down. You want the front piece to be on top of that side piece. Alright, I've got 6 of the base pieces glued in. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Dremel with the barrel sander, and I'm going to take the top edge off of this nice and easy until this piece can slide up over top of it. Do not take too much off because we have to end up filling that in around the corner. So I'm going to sand this one and this one until I can slide this in. And now with these 2 ends trimmed off, I can slide this piece on where it belongs. You're going to want to make sure it's centered on the door, not on the outside edge, because just like before, there's going to be a little lip on both sides that we're going to have to clean up. And that's fine. So make sure that the step down on this front base piece is lined up with the door, and then we'll glue that in place, ensuring that the top edge and the top edge here are lined up. This is that front piece we just glued on, and you'll see we do have a little bit of a lip here. And we're going to sand that off as well as soon as all the glue is dry underneath. In the meantime, we're going to go ahead and finish trimming up the outside pieces over here. So this is the long piece here on the front. This is the side piece. This is the back. It's laying on spec. This is that extra long piece that's sticking out, and you'll see we've got a little bit length here as well. We'll now take the Dremel, do the same process of trimming this off and trimming this off the back. Alright, while looking at finishing these corners, keep in mind that these are considered the concrete bases. Concrete does not have super sharp edges, especially in an older home. So this is where you'll take some of your artistic ability and clean up these corners a little bit to make it look like the corner of concrete. Furthermore, we are going to add a texture to this, giving it an older look as well. So that will help take up some of the imperfections here. So I'm just going to clean up these corners just a little, round off this tip here because in an older home that's not going to be super sharp on that corner, and then I'll sand off this bottom. Alright, I've got all the bases sanded and roughed up in the corners. They don't look so bad. I've also cleaned up that top edge so it doesn't look too sharp, as well as into the corner and around the front. I repeated that over on the other side, and the base is done. Therefore, the structure is now done. In a following video, we will putty it and sand it, prep it, texture it, paint it. We'll do all that in another video. Alright, so the structure is now complete. You're now ready to move on to putty and sanding, texture and paint, as well as assemble the rest of the parts that came in the kit. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, or you can contact us via our website or our Etsy shop, and subscribe to our channel so that you can see the coming videos of the windows, the atrium, the tower, the door, and then of course the final assembly.